Ford, thank you for joining us on the Opollo Podcast. We see a lot of things going on in the MSP world, and from a cybersecurity glance, I think it'd be great to have you on board, and thanks for joining us. So, I would like to start off by learning a little bit more about what brings you to the podcast today, and we have I have a few questions I'd like to go through, and your expertise, I think, would be fantastic for the audience. So do you mind, telling me what brought you into Opollo today?
No, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate you having me, and this is going to be a lot of fun. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Again, my name is Ford Winslow, CEO of ICE Cybersecurity. I've been in the cybersecurity business for going on 25 years, since before cybersecurity was even a word. Started my career in financial services in the large Fortune 50 financial services world. Transitioned out to the biotech world, and then started my first company that was an MSP and cloud platform in 2008. And I started this company in 2016 as a pure play cybersecurity company, a security risk management company, really focused on selling to, through, and with MSPs and partnering with MSPs to get great outcomes for small and mid-market companies.
Right. Good to have you on board. In your experience, what truly makes an MSP stand out in today's market, in your view?
Yeah, the struggle for differentiation, I think, is common among a lot of MSPs out there. There's been a rise in all-in-one solutions, if you will, whether they be security or PSA based or RMM based, tech stacks. There's a lot of those out there, and I think that in the old days, as an MSP, you had to be innovative and creative and select the right products and put together a solution that was differentiated because you put a lot of care and effort into it. And now with the rise of all-in-one solutions, that's becoming harder and harder. So you either have to differentiate on your vertical focus. We're seeing a lot of folks do that, whether that be legal services, legal, financial, healthcare, construction, manufacturing focus. That's one way folks are differentiating. Or their kit that they use. Are they using best of breed or some industry specific tooling that they can kind of hang their hat on and differentiate on? Or are there some customer line of business application focus? We've seen a lot of web development. We're seeing a lot of folks that can specialize in CRM, ERPs, or in medical records and healthcare. But that speaks to the struggle, I think, that everybody's in this sort of commoditized world where, maybe the value perception of IT has always struggled to be we've always struggled to keep that value perception high, especially in the mid-market.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. I mean, where this conversation really started from is, We here at Opollo, we sponsor a lot of events from Kaseya and ConnectWise and two of the big guys out there, and having a lot of conversations, even with the MSP, about how we're finding there's two camps in the market right now. One is they align themselves with Kaseya or ConnectWise. I mean, it's never easy to go to IT Nation and come out as a one-man band with a stick and say, "Hey, I'm now an MSP." But it's a real challenge because they have, in my view, excuse my language, guys, is a very second-rate type of solution. And a lot of these MSPs go out there with the standardized approach, go to clients, and then they struggle because they're trying to sell the standardized approach. Then you also have the bespoke MSPs. Now, we see a lot of MSPs, got quite a few clients in this place where they come in and they say, "All right, well, we're going to work with our stack, and we're also going to work with what you've got." Like, it was a particular client that I was talking to a couple of months ago, and it really got me thinking about it. How they won a deal, but the competitor lost out to them because they wanted to push their second-rate solution, and they were like, "No, we've spent all this money on this tier one. Why would you want to implement this?" And so our client won the deal because they got to implement, they worked within what the client had. So it got me thinking and talking. And I was just recently at the GTIA conference, and it was a really big topic there as well. people talking about how, the differences between the bespoke MSP and then the out of the box. And the more I research it, the more I think we're just going to end up with a bunch of MSP one-man bands who are selling the same shit as everyone else. And it's just a commodity, right? You got Kaseya's at 360 or 365 complete, which makes it just never easier, to be an MSP. And then they're clipping at the heels of these big MSPs. But then it's just like, is the MSP world just going to be plug and play? Like, hey, don't like this one, we're just going to get a new one. And it's going to be heavily commoditized. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. Like, I mean, have you seen much in your way forward in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like you, kind of see this, the all-in-one, and I, and Kaseya is a great example. They've done a great job putting that Kaseya 365 solution together. And if it's the right fit for your MSP, I think you can do a lot with it. And we're seeing companies that are, I'm seeing MSPs that have gone all in on Kaseya, and they have really, hitched their cart to the Kaseya horse. And they, in order to live in that environment, you have to be all in, and they make it hard for you to go elsewhere and to build a bespoke solution. That's their business model, and it benefits some MSPs. But then, I see other ones, especially in the, I would call it the mid-tier MSPs, or, not the one-man band, because it's fairly easy to switch if you only have a dozen customers. But if you have a couple hundred customers, you've got 50 engineers, you've invested in other technologies, that's where it's really hard. The switching cost is high. And you get into a sticky solution with Kaseya, you want a 3-year contract for all of their suite. They make it easy to move money around within a contract, but you're still locked into an overall spend. And then if you want to differentiate, or there's a new product out there or something like that, it's really hard to switch. So switching to Kaseya, if you're already invested and you've been doing this for a while and you're a decent sized MSP, that's a very hard thing. And then if, the next greatest thing comes along and you have to switch away from one of the Kaseya functions, that's difficult. So I'm seeing this conversation out there, and it's really around switching costs. And then there are, if you're going up into a little bit larger customer that has maybe an IT department, your co-managed IT, or you're, a little higher into the mid-market, we are seeing that where a customer has a piece of technology they've invested in that is best in breed. Let's take a SIM tool, for example. There are a lot of them out there that are great that you can't get into unless you're 200 or 300 users. But if you're there and you've invested in that, you might have invested several $100,000 as a customer over 3 or 5 years, switching to the Kaseya stack, it's probably not going to be a good conversation with your prospect if you're the MSP trying to make that happen. Well, again, nothing bad about Kaseya. I love them. We are a partner with Kaseya. We love them too. But that's where we see the challenges in their strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I one day actually think you're probably going to end up with Kaseya might be the MSP. It's basically powered by Kaseya, and that's, you have all these men running around like one-man bands with Kaseya and ConnectWise, and it's just, do you need to have that big MSP anymore? And honestly, it's probably going that way. It was a few years ago, my clients of ours were setting up SOCs, all around the world to do the follow the sun type of model, and spent $1 million to set up a SOC. I was at one of the Kaseya conferences a couple of years ago, and they were bringing out their SOC and, allowing MSPs to do it. And now it's become a big part of what you do. You had all these other vendors bringing them out, or it was a competitive advantage. Now, what are you seeing in the SOC space? Do you see the difference there of like bespoke build your own, or go to one of these vendors to provide a SOC for you? What are you seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of build your own, because it's, I think, like you said, the challenges and the infrastructure to get there are very high. If you want a 24/7 SOC in one location, you need minimum 8 employees. That's a pretty steep investment for anybody. And so the build your own, if you're a small, mid-sized MSP, that usually doesn't make sense. And then you're in one, are you doing follow the sun, university, that sort of thing. The Kaseya version, is fine. The rise of the product SOC, like the MDR solutions, like you're seeing from like SentinelOne, from ThreatLocker, from CrowdStrike, from Rapid7. Those are increasingly popular, and the value of those is going up. I see a lot of fit there. They're doing a very good job. And I think what most people they underestimate about the SOC is what you have to contribute as a customer or an MSP in order to make that SOC work for you. If you're in a very product specific SOC with a very, very narrow swim lane, they can take action, they can do things for you, and they can use their run book, which basically is, let's stop the bleeding and we'll call you. If you want a bespoke SOC, you have to have a run book for every scenario, or they're not going to know what to do. You got to train your people, or you've got to buy a SOC and train them on the run book. That's what the really high end SOCs will do. And then you got the really low end ones that will basically hit the pause button on what's happening, and then they call you. There's no customization in the run book. But that's the differentiation. We see another trend also is where MSPs will take their help desk, and they will try to turn those into SOCs or ads or train them up so they can be a SOC. And that kind of gets into, there's been some success there, as long as you don't have a lot of complexity or a lot of incidents or events. That can work pretty well, but it touches into the inherent conflict between security and IT. And often the economics don't work out. They sound like they might work out up front, but then you end up cannibalizing what makes you successful in the first place, which is your help desk a lot of times.
Do you have any examples in the field? I mean, you work in cyber, obviously. So do you have a story of an MSP you've seen differentiate in this way recently? And, perhaps what did they do differently?
Yeah, I've seen, so we have some MSPs that we work with that have selected outsourced SOC providers to be their SOC of choice. And then what they're doing with their help desk is they're managing the escalations from the SOC. So if you take, Rapid7 is a great example, but a lot of people are using like Huntress or SentinelOne or Rapid7 or some of those, right, where you can have a bit of a run book and you can teach them what to do, and they can take some actions. But they're going to call your folks to jump in and to have the knowledge of the customer, so they can provide that white glove service. And that's where we're seeing the most success, is where you have your team that's your account managers, your help desk people that your customers know and love, working with a third party SOC that can do the immediate, stop the bleeding, let's contain the incident, and then get back up and running to production status. And so then they're coordinating the backup vendor, whether that be Datto or whomever else you want to use, along with the SOC. And then your help desk, your on-call person in the middle of the night ends up being a quarterback for those activities, not the core SOC analyst that's tasked with making the right decisions, in a room by themselves at 3:00 in the morning. I've been there. That's not an easy task, and you better get it right, or your name's going to be mud.
Do you have any advice for someone who's looking at doing that, or what they should do? Or
yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about building a SOC, and I've built a couple myself, I would say be very careful about the your model for how you're going to handle runbook, what your economic model is, and double your cost assumptions for people and for technology, because you are going to very quickly get into a deep end of the pool, and there you'll get into what you don't know that you don't know, and you're going to get halfway down the build. You're going to be hiring people, and then you're going to find out that it takes a lot more than you think. And I'm not besmirching anybody who would try this. There's a lot of smart people out there doing it, but if you've never done it before, just go in eyes wide open and know that it's going to be there's going to be challenges that you can't anticipate.
Yeah. Would you say it's probably best for most smaller MSPs to not even consider it and just go with an off-the-shelf type of solution, with one of your, with either like Kaseya, ConnectWise, or even one of the partners who are at one of these events? It's a pretty good one. Is it Sophos have a pretty good one as well? What would you use a good SOC? Yeah, yeah. Would you just recommend that they go straight to that, or look at, how would you assess that sort of situation?
That would be, if I were building an MSP from scratch today, that would be one of my first stops, is to look at those MDR solutions or those outsourced SOC solutions. And you got to remember why those exist. Why would Sophos build a SOC? Well, if all their customers were doing SOC services correctly and they were handling breaches well, they wouldn't do that. But they're doing it because their product is installed and there's a breach and it gives them a bad look. So they're building that as a way to protect their brand and offer a new offering, that generates them some money. But it doesn't help their enterprise valuation. They're a software company, not a services company. So the only reason they're doing that is to protect their brand. And that's an important thing. And they're motivated to do the right thing with their product in their swim lane.
Would that devalue the MSP by go it without building their own SOC, or would you, does that mean that they're not as valuable in the market, or do you see any risks there about having to use someone else's infrastructure to deliver it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that you can go wrong with that if you don't think about how you protect your reputation and the service level you're delivering. But there's a lot of room to provide great service on top of a SOC. The SOC is not going to manage your customer accounts. They're not going to manage license counts. They're not going to manage all the customer satisfaction issues and things that you have, which is arguably, how you protect your customer base, your revenue.
Reputational risk could be worse than do it yourself. Then that would be a bigger risk.
They're mechanics. They're there to turn wrenches and change your tires and make sure that your car stays on the road. They're not the drivers. So, I think if you expect them to do all the security work for you and replace that customer touch, then you're probably going to run into some problems. But if you use them for what they do, don't, trust but verify, test them, make sure they're doing a good job. Don't toss them over the fence to your customer, but also, don't try to hide who they are. You can have a great partnership and you can build a lot of value on that.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm not building, as a security company, I'm not building a SOC. I've done it a couple of times, and there's such good ones out there, and they're product agnostic, and they all have a little different fit and a little different way that they operate that are different fits for different clients and different MSPs. For me to try to build a Swiss Army knife that covers all of those bases is foolish in this economy and where the world is today.
Yeah. So how would from a cybersecurity point of view, how would you differentiate an MSP? Like, what sort of offerings would you, if you want to launch? Because we've seen a lot of MSPs, trying to push out their cybersecurity services. It just becomes a tick in the box. It's just another thing that they can do. But what would you say an MSP should do to actually use cyber more than just a tick in the box, or for them as their value proposition?
That's a great question. I think if you think about cyber like an MSP, where you want to operate efficiency, less touch, more automation, just add another line item and collect more MRR for it, you're probably you'll be somewhat successful, but probably not as successful as you could be. There's an inherent conflict in MSP and MSSP, or in the security world, because MSP is really at the core. You want to close tickets as quickly as possible and prevent those tickets from being opened in the first place. In cyber, you really need you need to have a higher touch model, and it's important for people to understand this, that it's cyber. If you just sit there and wait for an incident and then cyber happens for a customer, you are going to get blamed for every bad thing that happens, and every interaction with your customer will be negative. If you don't find a way to give them positive cybersecurity news and give them the bad news, as well as the way that the things that they need to fix to make their company more resilient, then you're missing the boat with cyber. Cyber has to be more visible than IT in a lot of ways. IT is about making it work. Cyber is about what could go wrong. And understanding what could go wrong means you got to be engaged with your customer, know their business, know their stack, know what's happening with them. And the economics of cyber for an MSP are important to understand, is that talent is expensive. It's 2 to 3x the cost for a cyber person as it is for an IT person. There are 3.5 million unfilled cyber jobs worldwide, 750,000 in the United States. Right? Unemployment rate is off the charts for is zero, for cyber, whereas it's 5-ish% for tech. And so salaries are going up, skills gap is going up, your competition for jobs is going up, and turnover is very high, both because the job is stressful and because you can go you go work for 6 months and you can go make more money at the next place. It's like tech jobs from 20 years ago. And so the MSP approach to cyber is very hard to overcome because of that, because of the people, because of the upfront investment to get enough people to get to ROI. You might lose money for a little while in your cyber practice if you decide to, if you build it ahead of revenue. And it can take, you might invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary before you get ROI on your cyber practice.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. From a go-to-market strategy, like this is the challenge. Like a lot of MSPs, they want to build up their cyber security practice and they want to go out to tell the world. But how do you see that? Like, great, you've got your cyber practice. How do you see that translating into a go-to-market strategy, like building leads? Like, do you see that they, from success stories you see, like cyber first approach, go out to market, or make it as one of the things, like once they've been introduced and they're in the funnel, start talking about cyber? Have you seen any good examples, or do you have any advice for anyone who's looking at, obviously a lot of businesses provide cyber, but making it part of their core value proposition rather than just being in the background? Do you have any advice for an MSP trying to do that?
It's going to sound glib, but it's give me a call, because this is something that we solve for MSPs, and I say that jokingly, but it's we've done this it's taken us a long time to get here to figure out how to do this well, and I think we came up with an answer, where there's a core group of things that a cyber that we believe make up an offering for an MSP for cyber. Right? You're going to already be selling your firewalls, your antivirus licenses, things that, a lot of the tools and things are already likely part of your kit. But can we add some differentiated, additional things, like, for example, compliance, assessments and compliance, work? There's a lot of tools out there you can use that can give you your questionnaire to run through. How do you answer CMMC readiness assessment? But to deliver that with CMMC professionals, so you can take that, turn that into an independent report of here's where you stand against CMMC and what you need to do to solve that, that has integrity. That's that's another level. And there's one way that I've seen that work with MSPs, where we come in and start with assessments. And is that, organizational assessments, your CIS, your NIST, your CMMC, high trust, HIPAA, those kinds of things. Technical assessments, so doing cloud security assessments, doing Microsoft 365, penetration testing, vulnerability scanning. All of those activities are incredibly value added. Security awareness training, policies and procedures, all of those things that are generally cost centers for MSPs, or when a customer calls them and they say, "Oh my goodness, I got to go write a security policy," they haven't thought of a way to monetize that. That's a way that turn all those things that you don't want to do, that are the painful things that your customers ask you to do, and turn them into a SKU in a way to give them value, in a way for them to pay for those things that they need. And we have a lot of that built out. And when we work with an MSP, we want to come in with our platform, our risk management platform, work on the solutions that you're going to go sell to your end customers to add on the stack of security things that help you get there. So we may do the assessments in the beginning until you have somebody that can do them on your own, and then you do them, and you take all that. You have efficiency gains because now your people are more utilized. their higher bill rate because they've gone up stack. And you're starting to make more top line, more gross margin, more retention, more net profit as an MSP. There's one way to do it.
Well, what are the three things that you see that MSPs get wrong when they're trying to sell cyber?
I think selling cyber as a product is the first most common thing that we see out there. That you just buy SentinelOne or you buy Kaseya or you buy, a product XYZ and that's your cyber program. Cyber is a process. It's not a product. And so if you're not, how you use those products and how you bring value to those products and actually manage and measure risk reduction using those products, that's the key to cyber. The other one I think is trying to take that MSP approach to cyber, which is how few tickets can we generate and respond to. You got to embrace it and embrace the contact and the communication with the customer and the higher touch model, because it's quite frankly worth more value to the customer. That's what they want. And then I think the last is ignoring the breadth of cyber and the depth. And so cyber goes from the boardroom, all the way to the server room. And it goes end to end through every business unit in the company. And so if you're an IT person and all you're doing is talking to the office manager or the CFO about ticket closures, about laptop upgrades, about license upgrades, that's not going to cut it. You have to understand the people, the processes, the data, the platforms that your customers use for their lines of business, what's there, what the privacy situations are, also who the partners are, who the community is that this customer engages with. And their governance. You got to understand, do they have a board of directors? Do they have is it a single owner company? Do they have regulatory requirements? Do they have investors? These are all very important things in the cyber conversation. But if you embrace those, it lets you go upstream for your customer. Most MSPs have a struggle talking to the chairman of the board or the CEO. In cyber, you have to speak with those people. It is a wonderful retention stickiness effect that you can have if you do it right.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Now, you talked a bit about like people coming in to see you if they want to sort of expand their cyber practice. What's the biggest change that you've seen working with an MSP, on the sales process? What could they do that improves conversion rates or revenue? Is there anything that you've seen that they could tweak in their sales process that's generated, gone from like a 3x or, a 20% increase in revenue? Is there anything that you've seen, working with MSPs?
Yeah. A few, it's really, we talked a little bit about it before was attaching to the business drivers and really what are the core, things that the customer's trying to achieve. In the last 5 years, one of the biggest changes has been cyber as an enabler for revenue for most companies. We mentioned briefly CMMC earlier, or you talk about high trust, or you talk about, SOC 2 or certifications. Those are increasingly becoming required. And I even heard somebody at Kaseya say that if you didn't have a certification in the next 5 years, if you don't have a security certification, you'll never get another customer. And they were speaking to MSPs, but I think that's probably thematic in every business out there.
Have you seen a MSP just tweak one thing and seen them grow their contracts or anything like that? Or is there a particular thing, like we talk about like asking for requirements. I sort of said, well, how do you find out what the requirements are without going too technical? Is there anything in particular that you've seen that has really like made major shift in their approach?
Yeah, I have. I'm thinking about one client we helped an MSP out with who they were facing a contract. They were going after a contract that required them to have an ISO 27001 certification, and this was the customer of the MSP, and they it was the biggest contract the customer never had. It was something like 3 years worth of their total revenue was tied up in this one contract. So it's a game changer for the customer. MSP had never been through ISO 27001 certification before. Didn't know where to start. Didn't know how to get there. And it was sort of this contentious, painful conversation because they knew they were going to give up the business to somebody else if they didn't find a solution. So we talked to them. And the timelines were incredibly aggressive. It was like 7 weeks from first conversation to ISO certification, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody going that fast. But what we were able to do together was you start with policies and procedures and process, right? That's ISO is all about that. And then there are technologies, there's services, there's things that the customer needed to do in order to achieve that level of security and maturity so they could get their compliance and then maintain it. So short story long, we got to the end of this. We got them their 27001 certification, working hand in hand with the MSP. The MSP sold them it was a nice project, good chunk of hours, but they tripled their recurring revenue with that customer out of the end of it because that's what was required to maintain that and to satisfy the new normal that was working under that ISO 27001 certification. And along the way, the MSP had to go expand and do a few things that they maybe weren't doing before, but they really didn't get outside of their box. But all of the stuff that they had recommended that the customer do for the last year or year and a half, that they said, you really need to upgrade your firewall. You really need to get rid of your Windows 10 machines. You really need to go, implement this piece of technology. All of a sudden, when you look at it in terms of, in the ISO 27001 light, under a revenue driver for the customer, all those things got done. So it was really a game changer. And we see that same pattern over and over again. If you put revenue, compliance, and security as the motivator, it moves the needle in ways that sometimes your help desk people can't. When they tell the customer they need to buy another laptop or something.
No, I think that's really good what you've just covered over as well around the around that revenue change.
It's that I call that the struggle for credibility a little bit sometimes with the MSP. And I think, and what we find is that when we're working hand in hand with an MSP and we're independent, right, is we have that trust and verify, we have those, that independent look from an IT perspective and a security perspective. And it works out really, really well.
Do you think the problem is that MSPs just aren't asking the right questions, or the owners are asking too many technical questions and not looking at the people in the process? They look too much go straight into the technology. Do you think that's part of the problem that we're seeing? Or what would you say is the biggest challenge that we have? Because most MSP owners are techs who have grown into having a business with 10, 20, 50, 100 staff behind them. And they always have that tech orientation. Is that the challenge, or what would you say is the biggest challenge around, asking the right questions?
I think that's right. I think that, like you said, most MSP owners started out as being an in-house IT or working in another MSP or a tech role. And understanding the drivers. Why do customers do things? Why are they adopting things? What's the business driver for the customer to take any action? I think that's one of the biggest challenges out there. And I think AI is just shining a bright light on that need. It's also a great opportunity for technical people to up level and create a new conversation with the customer.
I think if you don't have AI in your offering today, you're going to be left behind, because every company out there is bleeding at the moment and they want to make more revenue. So you've got to have whether you're working on AI in your business internally or even AI with your customer, you need to really work on that. What would you say is the top 3 industries that have opportunity at the moment? We talked a little bit about, was it construction or roofing? There was a couple of organizations. This is for a North America point of view. What would you say is the industries that have the biggest opportunity right now?
I think the DoD contractor space, or those who will be regulated by CMMC, is probably the biggest right now. It's still forming, and we're starting to see signals where they're actually spending money, but it's affecting every company out there, like the trades. Like we've spoken with with a like a framing contractor, a drywall contractor, an electrician, a roofer over the last 3 weeks that are all have contracts with for military bases, and they have to be CMMC certified too. That's very new ground for the client and the MSP. So there's one, and then I think look at other, follow the regulation. I think healthcare is an obvious place, and if you think about the healthcare adjacent space, so every nonprofit, every collaboration partner with healthcare, there's a huge increase in scrutiny going on there. And then look at those who sell to highly regulated industries. So, you talk about your government primes, also publicly traded companies. There is a huge push in publicly traded companies to assess the security of their service providers. And if you're a service provider or your customers are service providers to larger customers, the regulations are flowing down, and it's going to have a very real impact. And if they haven't already felt it, they will feel it soon.
Okay, great. That's
right. It requires, again, you got to know your customer, you got to know the people, you got to know the business they're in. It's not just tech for tech. It's about people talking to people and understanding where they're going with their business.
Oh, that's the biggest thing that we see of MSPs when they're out there selling the same shit as everyone else. The ones who get ahead are the ones who understand. We've got a client who just focused on the law industry and tripled their business in 18 months because they knew the legislation said that you had to do this, and so they went ahead with Sophist and did an amazing job and tripled their business. They went to market with it, but it's also right place at right time. And it's a challenge when you have MSP owners who are so focused on running their business. I know a lot of MSP owners that get up at 4:00 in the morning and go to bed at midnight. It's not uncommon. And so how do you have time to learn and grow? So look, I would like to thank you, Ford, for being on the podcast today. It's been really good hearing some of your insights, and thank you very much, Ford.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.